Welcome back to Inside the Trenches. Before the show, I was on Reddit and I was just reading through some questions that people were asking, and I found this one really interesting, so I wanted to talk about it with you here on the show. In the NFL, if everybody was expendable, everybody was on the trade block, that's including players, general managers, and coaches, if they were all available for trade, who, in your opinion, is the most valuable asset in the NFL and would probably, like in the open trade market, get the most for them in a trade? Who, and this is taking age into consideration, contract into consideration, everything's into consideration here. Who do you think is worth the most in the NFL?
Oh man, that's very difficult. I guess I would probably have to go with either Aaron Rodgers or Andrew Luck. And,
why?
Well, when you think about it, I mean, you pretty much convinced me into this before the show. Quarterbacks are, I mean, if you don't have a good quarterback in the league, in this league, you're not going to be a good team.
You have to have a defense with like 10 Pro Bowlers on it almost to be good.
I mean, you pretty much need a quarterback. And that's not to say that, okay, coaches, it doesn't matter if you have a good coach or not. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, if you don't have a good quarterback, your coach, I mean, you could have a great coach and your team could be average, but if you don't have a good quarterback, your team's not going to be a really good team.
I definitely agree with that, and that's why I picked a quarterback as well. And wait, did you pick one between the two, or did you pick two? You have to pick. Would you say Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers? You have to pick one. Who's the more valuable of the two?
I guess I would go Aaron Rodgers just because he is a little older, but I feel like if I'm a GM and I have Aaron Rodgers, I can use the next, I don't know, however many years he's going to play, 5 to 10 years. I don't know about 10, but that span of time, I can use that to see who's coming out of college, quarterback-wise, and try to find somebody pretty good.
I think there's an interesting thing to think about here with age. So I was just thinking about this with Aaron Rodgers. You said about his age. I think he could easily play 5 more years at an elite level. And 5 years is about your typical length of a long contract in the NFL. And there's no guarantee that at the end of that contract, a player would re-sign with a team anyways, right? So even if you pick a guy who's 23 years old and he looks really good and you think, oh, we could keep him for a decade, there's no guarantee of that if he's only on a 5-year deal. So maybe picking a guy like Aaron Rodgers, if you're only just trying to get the most out of him for one contract you can, that might be the best answer in the NFL. And if I was looking for just like the next 5 years, I think Aaron Rodgers is the most valuable player in the NFL. But because you want to take the risk that maybe you can find your guy for the next 10 to 12 years, I picked Russell Wilson. And here's the reason for that. It's going to be hard to find a better leader in the NFL than Russell Wilson. It's going to be hard to find a more versatile quarterback in the NFL than Russell Wilson, who has a big arm, can run all over the place, pretty accurate. It's going to be hard to find a guy who in his first, 3 years in the NFL went to 2 Super Bowls and won one. It's hard to find a guy like Russell Wilson. Have you picked him at the beginning of his career on any other team than Seattle, he might not be who he is now. But I think if you took Russell Wilson today from Seattle and put him on any other team, he could still be the same guy you see on the field. He goes to the playoffs every year. He never gives up. I think about that game against Carolina 2 years ago in the NFC Championship game. They were down, was it 28-0 at halftime? He fought and clawed back into that game so much. Went into halftime, and I didn't even want to watch the second half. It was such a blowout. And they came out. He just started throwing touchdowns left and right. He makes guys like Doug Baldwin look like Pro Bowlers when I'm not sure if Doug Baldwin would be a Pro Bowler on another team. Russell Wilson, to me, is the most valuable asset in the NFL from his leadership, his actual success he has already had on the field, what he could be, and his versatility and his age.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but I don't know. I just don't feel like Russell Wilson is the kind of guy who, if you could have anybody you wanted, if I would go, okay, I want Russell Wilson.
You might not, but I just think that there's no downside to Russell Wilson. With other guys, there's injury history. That's not there with Russell Wilson. There's age. That's not there with Russell Wilson. There might be character concerns. That is the last thing you have with Russell Wilson. Like your physical attributes, his height, he's already proved that doesn't matter. He's gone to 2 Super Bowls being short. It's one thing if he came into the league short and you didn't know, he's fine with his height. There's literally no downside to Russell Wilson. And any other quarterback in the league, I can think of probably at least one.
Again, understandable, but I feel like if I could have anyone, including coaches, GMs, anybody, I would pick a few other people ahead of Russell Wilson.
And I can understand that. I had a list of people in my mind. The people I thought of were the two you listed, Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers. My knocks here. Injury history and age with Aaron Rodgers, right? Not going to be there as long. Andrew Luck, definitely an injury history with Andrew Luck, and sometimes some questionable decision-making on the field. Derek Carr was another big name I thought of because I think he could be an absolute stud in this league. Injury problem now. The one with the cleanest record to me was Russell Wilson, and I think if in a trade, he might be worth more than anybody else in the league right now. So now let me change the question up and make it a little bit more interesting to you. No quarterbacks. Now who's the most valuable asset in the NFL if we're not talking about quarterbacks?
Now there's about three really good options that I would go with. And in order from first to worst, I guess I could say that, but it definitely wouldn't be worst. But anyway, the guy who I would really want would be John Elway. And when you think about it, it's because
I think that Broncos homer's coming out in you just a little bit. Wearing your Denver shirt right now here in the studio, I can just sense the smile on your face while you're picking John Elway. But go ahead.
Well, okay, when you think about it, yes, I mean, I'm a Bronco fan, but when you look deep into it, ever since he became the GM in Denver, every one of his drafts have been phenomenal. The only one that was just not so good was this last one, where maybe the two biggest names that came out of it, maybe three big names if you want to count Paxton Lynch, Justin Simmons and Will Parks, who, I mean, they're good players, but they're not stars. When you look at past drafts, he had a draft, when he drafted Von Miller, Demaryius Thomas, and Eric Decker all in the same draft. I mean, that's an incredible draft.
Also, let's not forget that he had arguably maybe the greatest free agency signing in the history of the league, up there with like Reggie White signing as a free agent. He brought in Peyton Manning to the Broncos when we didn't see what maybe he saw in Peyton Manning. We all saw a declining, aging guy who one more hit might not play anymore. Peyton Manning came in, took them to 2 Super Bowls. I guess won one, kind of like he won one. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't take that away from the guy. But he also had the greatest passing season in the history of the NFL. And Demaryius Thomas and Eric Decker are who they are because of Peyton Manning as well. Mm-hmm. So I think not only is he drafted well, which he has, look at the team he's built so far. I mean, granted, there's a couple questions on offense. He's built a heck of a team, and there are teams cherry-picking left and right off of his roster, taking the guys he's drafted and helped develop there. I think he's built a great team. I think he had one of the greatest free agency signings of all time, and I definitely can see where you're coming from with John Elway. Now, sorry, if you want to keep going?
I'll go a little longer.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, it's all right. So anyway, like you were saying with the Peyton Manning signing, it's and how you said he saw something in him that maybe other people didn't. And I think what that was Peyton Manning. I mean, he was an older guy. He was an old quarterback who could be done then. He could be done 5 years from now, like he did. And that's what John Elway was at the end of his career. He was a guy who was getting older, and he just wanted to win a Super Bowl and then be done. He wound up winning back-to-backs and then being done, but I think that's what he saw in Peyton Manning, and that's why he tried so hard and eventually got him to come there. But then getting past John Elway, I just want to slide in my other two options real quick. My second option would be Bill Belichick.
Understandable. Not even much to cover on that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's Bill Belichick. It's pretty much all you got to say about that. But then my third option would actually be Pete Carroll. And
so no players other than quarterbacks.
No.
Okay.
No. Pete Carroll, because of what you were saying about Russell Wilson, how if you took him when he was a rookie and he was never on Seattle and went to a different team, he wouldn't be what he is now. But if you took him now and put him somewhere else, he'd be the same guy. It's because of Pete Carroll. It's because of the environment that Pete Carroll
I absolutely think you're right.
there in Seattle.
I definitely think you're right, and I'm not going to argue that at all. I think what he built there in Seattle, while it's slowly falling apart, mostly due to having to pay guys who are playing out of their minds, the team he had built there for a couple of years, like the last 3-4 years, pretty insane. Coaching those guys who were all rookies, guys who had a lot of question marks on them, guys who were castaways from other teams, and making them into Pro Bowlers. I think Pete Carroll is one of the elite coaches in the NFL. But my pick is none of those guys. It's a player on the field, the Mac's own Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack has a cap hit this next year of just under $6 million. He could basically, you could give him a blank checkbook after this next year. Khalil Mack, Defensive Player of the Year, already, still in a rookie contract, can play as a 3-4 outside linebacker, can play as a 4-3 defensive end with his hand in the dirt, could be arguably the best pass rusher in the league at either position, the versatility, how young he is, not a big injury history, the production, and he has the ability to maybe be the leading sack guy in the league for the next 5 years. I think pass rushing is so invaluable in the league, and you saw that the year the Broncos won the Super Bowl. Von Miller getting paid crazy amount of money, and they didn't win it because they were dominating on offense that year. And the year they did dominate on offense, they didn't win because they didn't have that dominant defensive pressure. Khalil Mack, to me, is the most valuable player in the NFL right now because of his age, because of his production, his versatility, and I'm talking about outside of quarterbacks. I just think that Khalil Mack is one of those guys you could give a blank checkbook to, and that if you offered the Raiders a trade for Khalil Mack right now, I don't think that there's something they would probably accept that you'd be willing to give up from any team in the league.
I don't think so. I love Khalil Mack. After Pete Carroll, it would probably be 3 pass rushers in a row. Khalil Mack, J.J. Watt, and Von Miller. But Khalil Mack, to me, like you said, he's an incredible player. He's a young player, and he's dominant at multiple positions. And his work, the work that he puts in off the field in the weight room, as a leader, is just everything. It's outstanding what he does. And to me, if you bring that guy into any team, he's going to be a big-time leader for rookies that you bring in, and he's going to increase your team overall. So I think that guy is definitely up there in the top assets of the league, maybe even ahead of some of the top quarterbacks in the league right now, as far as assets go.